So Sarah, what would you like to say to the group, just to introduce yourself perhaps to the group? Some of you may have seen Sarah on previous sessions or our annual CPD day, but what would you like to share, Sarah?
I'll just say a very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for coming and participating here. Great to see the range of different locations. I think, David, you're in Shropshire. I'm also in Shropshire. So here I am. I've come back to my roots, and I've been working as an executive coach, team coach, and indeed group coach for about 20 years now. Very briefly, I'm a chartered coaching psychologist. That's my background. And Damien, you and I have known each other, I think, for about 10 years or so, where we met on a systemic constellations program and held the intention to do some work together and collaborate together. And here we are with some of the fruit of that we're going to be speaking about. So that's a little bit about me. Back to you, Damien.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, and for those who don't know me, I'm the founder of Catalyst. Similar to Sarah, I work as an exec coach. Been involved in coaching now for yeah, about 26 years, I think. So group coaching is a passion of mine as well. So when Sarah and I came together to create our training, it really enabled me to bring all of my experiences, the good and the bad, from being with groups as well. So we're going to sort of spend some time to just talk about a few areas that may be of interest for the group listening around group coaching. I was just going to say at the start, because we're coaches, conversation with an outcome, just any questions, any really, I suppose, key learning pieces for you that you'd really like to take away from this session today, please feel free to add those to the chat panel. Again, it would just give Sarah and I a sense of where your interest is around group coaching. So I'm just going to give you a moment to add anything in there, just to pop those through, and then Sarah and I can make a start. Okay, thanks, Richard. See their real interest around structure. Anything else from anybody would be interested today? Engage your remote groups, dynamics. Okay, lovely. I can see there from Jane, any further reading around this would recommend as well. Okay. So please feel free to add those in there and we will bring them in. So Sarah, should we just start with a bit of why perhaps we developed the course?
Yeah, and maybe I think, Damien, it would be great to hear from you first on this, because I think you had the original spark of an idea to create the group coaching skills program. And I'm wondering what inspired that original spark you had.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm sure the coaches sort of watching this, so will probably agree with some of what I say. I mean, I think the first thing was, I think group coaching is a bit of a poor relation of team coaching, and in the industry, team coaching has been a trend, for the last 10 years or so. And there's been a lot of research, a lot of focus, a lot of training around team coaching, and I would say that hasn't been the case for group coaching. I think the research has been lacking. I think the support has been lacking. And, in my own practice, a lot of the coaches that I was supporting through supervision were being asked to do group coaching and were feeling quite, lacking confidence about whether this is the same, is it different? What are the structures I use? How do I work with group dynamics? So there was a lot of uncertainty, actually. And then I think the final thing I would add, and then perhaps there might be some reflections from you as well. I also think that coaches and organizations are missing a trick with the value that group coaching actually brings. And you know, one of my aims through our collaboration and, you know, the training that we were doing, I suppose, for me was really about, you know, creating some real interest and motivation about delivering group coaching, because I think from my own experience, it can be some of the most inspiring learning that I've seen happen for leaders. And I think group coaching is a real vehicle to, and I'm sure we'll come on and talk about this, but really to maximize that sort of learning environment.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I can really relate to your observation there about group coaching being maybe the poor cousin of team coaching. There are fewer offers around there, so you could also say more opportunity. And I think we will come on to talking about the benefits of team coaching, the challenges as well. And, you know, I sometimes think when I reflect on my own practice, that there can be a perception sometimes that group coaching is way more challenging. It's a much bigger dashboard that you as the coach need to have your eye on. And in some ways, I think that's true. And in another way, I sometimes think group coaching is easier because to some extent the group do the work. And I certainly leave group coaching sessions, I think you use inspired learning, really appreciating the rich learning that can come out of a group dynamic. It's like learning on multiple levels. So both things are true for me. It's both in a way more complex than individual coaching and at the same time easier. Curious thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And but I also, I mean, I spent in my last coaching business, you know, I was involved with training team coaches, and I would see that actually the coaches that had experience of group coaching, you know, were able to take on the different hats that the team coach was wearing a lot more effectively than perhaps the coaches that were lacking that. So I also think there's something core here around the skills that we develop as a group coach, that therefore if we want to lean into working with a team, you know, that's really at the heart of the intervention, I would say.
Yes, and you're reminding me that early on in the 3-day program, one of the questions that we invite participants to reflect on is just what's been your experience working with groups? Because you might have done some facilitation, group facilitation, not necessarily group coaching, but actually all that experience working with groups, handling group dynamics, and I know there's questions in the chat around group dynamics, is really beneficial, and it will resource you very well for moving into the group coaching role.
So should we just talk a bit about what group coaching is, Sarah?
Go for it. Yeah.
Again, let's just put a bit of structure around what we're referring to. So when I talk about group coaching, I talk about it's a small group facilitated process, which is really about, I suppose a key element is learning. A key distinction between team and working with groups is the group will have individual objectives they're wanting to achieve from the group coaching process. Obviously, when we're working with a team, we're enabling the individual to achieve theirs, but we're more focused on the collective improvement of the team. And I also think the other part of group coaching, which you know, we can come on and talk about, is also there's an intent about building some new skills as a result of the group coaching process.
Yeah, I think
what you would add, Sarah.
Yeah, so there's the learning element, the individual objectives, more so than in the team coaching session. I think it's very good that point you're making about building new skills as well. So learning how to participate effectively in a group setting where maybe you've got some quite blabby individuals, maybe you've got some quieter ones. So just the experience as a participant of handling all that. And I think the other thing I would underline is it's a real space to reflect together, as a group, as well as your own individual reflection about how you're doing with your objectives or the issue that you're bringing. So you've got a reflective space on a collective level that goes, I think, above and beyond the reflective space of an individual coaching session.
Mm. Yeah, great. And that sort of really, I suppose, emphasizes a lot of the benefits that, I'm going to say we've experienced, but we also, hear from people that we're training. So maybe for the people that aren't familiar with running group coaching, let's just talk. We'll talk about some benefits and then potentially some challenges before we get into some more of the granular stuff. So, what would you say are some of the benefits, Sarah?
Yeah, I think again, just focusing maybe above and beyond individual coaching, there's something about, I don't really know what to call it. I'm gonna call it the multiplier effect. So it's coaching that's taking place in a shared field. So I get to observe somebody else being coached. And in observing another person bringing an issue, I often find I can in some way relate to that issue. And so that's this multiplier effect, that I can learn about things through observation without actually me having to necessarily do the coaching, or maybe I'm sitting back a little bit more. That can be very beneficial. I think there's something about the group field that can just charge the space with lots of energy. So I think the learning can be very impactful. It can really go deep, I think, in a group coaching session when you've got that safe and energizing space. And I think we've touched on it already, that additional benefit of learning how to be a participant in a group that's going on a journey together.
Mm.
Would you add to those benefits?
Oh, I mean, well, I was with a group earlier actually, and it's a familiar thing in a checkout where people are saying, what I really appreciate is the fact that I'm not on my own. That you're experiencing this as well. So I think there's a normalizing process for the individual. I think that one of the benefits is that real sense of peer support that participants of group coaching often experience. So, for example, you might have a group that have come together for a thematic reason. So perhaps, they might be in transition, or they might be experiencing perhaps an organizational change that they're leading. I mean, we've just finished actually supporting an organization that's been going through a significant change. And, one of the key pieces of feedback they had was this peer network, which they've had throughout this change process, has really supported their well-being individually as they've been leading this change. So I think there's a big piece here about that community that comes from group coaching. And I think the other bit is a bit we mentioned earlier. I think the skills that come through. I mean, I spend a lot of my life training leaders how to coach. And again, when I see leaders in group coaching and they're developing strong listening skills, and also developing their capability to ask questions to each other, you see these interpersonal skills happening, which don't necessarily happen in that one-to-one coaching space. And I think that can be so rewarding.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. How about let's flip it a little bit then. How about the challenge? So what challenges have you seen, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about really sitting in the seat of the group coach, mentioned it, that sense, I often have the sense there is a bigger dashboard, there's more people to keep my eye on, than in the one-to-one setting. And as you've acknowledged, individuals are often there with their own objective. So there's a challenge about how do you be even-handed and fair in terms of airtime with your group of participants. And I know we touch on it in the programme, Damien, that sometimes it helps to acknowledge it's not just a one-off session. You might have contracted for a series of 6 sessions. So some of what eases the challenge sometimes is to be even-handed across a number of sessions rather than just in one session. But that can be a challenge, along with just sometimes managing some of the trickier group dynamics. If you've got 1 or 2 people who, you know, are quite dominant in terms of the airwaves, or somebody who's quite quiet, and you might need to be really drawing them in quite an active way without them feeling too put on the spot. So the group dynamic can be a challenge in the group coaching situation.
Yeah, thank you.
How about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think with a successful group coaching program, one of the challenges can often be, I suppose, the budget available. You know, so sometimes there might be pressure points, which means that the consultancy we're doing up front, the sort of pre-conversations you're having with group members on an individual basis to start the contracting process, to start them really identifying the why they're coming to the group coaching process. They're the things that can be at risk in those moments. And also, there's a lack of understanding what group coaching is, and a lack of sponsorship often. You know, if the organisation aren't sponsoring the intervention, there's no clear purpose in terms of the organisational need. Again, I think that can create some challenge in terms of, well, why am I here? So I think the sort of lack of preparation, lack of sponsorship, and no clear purpose can be really challenges for the group coach, actually.
Yeah. And you're also listening to you there makes me think about how important it is, all the contracting side and the confidentiality, and of course, particularly if you're working within one organisation where people might know each other. But just, I think one of the challenges is making sure that you spend a sufficient amount of time contracting with the group for working together effectively, really mindful of confidentiality.
Yeah, and a sort of piece there around also, you know, as the group coach, doing your sort of intelligence collecting up front, you know, in terms of, well, who's coming, because obviously you're looking for things like, is there going to be any hierarchy in the group, you know, any existing relationships, any difficulties that you need to be aware of, any things happening in the organization that might be impacting the group coaching process. I'd say there's a lot more consultancy that we'll be doing up front compared to a one-to-one session. It's really about making sure that we're preparing the grounds, and we talk about this a lot on the training, actually. I think the other challenge can often be people's experience of learning. You know, so coming into a group coaching intervention, perhaps coaching is unfamiliar to you, so actually there's a sense of you're going to be receiving. You know, the group coach is going to be training you or developing you, when actually this can be a very, very different experience for someone, and can be quite, well, any coaching can be anxiety provoking, but I think being in that group space as a leader can be really, I suppose, shift you into a place of vulnerability that you may not be experiencing day to day. And I think whilst that's a benefit, because then you become more comfortable sitting in vulnerability, sitting in uncertainty, I think initially it can be a real challenge for the group coach to really create that safe space.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. So just really want to underline it, that there is something, it seems, working in groups just brings up anxiety for some people, for most people to different degrees. Will I be liked? Will people approve of me? Will I feel I belong to the group? And all those things are bubbling away under the surface, I think, particularly at the first session or the early sessions. And as you rightly say, people feel more vulnerable, and it's very good to be aware of that.
Mm-mm. So I've just seen, I know there's questions coming through. I've just seen Kat's question picking up on that hierarchy. I would be having a conversation with the people involved to see what the reality is of it, of the hierarchy in terms of the potential impacts on the group dynamic. It may be that it might be more suitable for them to be somewhat, one of them to be in a different group, who knows, but I'd be having that conversation. I wouldn't tend to have a group with a leader. I mean, it's different from team coaching. We're not there to work on the dynamic of the team, so I wouldn't be having a hierarchy in the room really as much as I could contract for that. So we've sort of been leaning into this a little bit with some of our reflections, Sarah, but why not now talk about the skill set? So then there might be some things that we can offer around the skill set that would be helpful for coaches. But what do we see as different in terms of the expanded skill set?
Yes, so and we've touched on it already, the sort of the skills of managing the group dynamic, reading the room, noticing the atmosphere, sometimes having to, whilst you might have a structure, that's sometimes you have to flex that because of an issue that arises. I'm also thinking, and Damien, it would be great to hear your thoughts on this as well, because I know at Catalyst 1.4, a lot of it is about presence and enabling potential. I think you could argue that to do group coaching work, you need to be really rooted and present and grounded, because the reality is, in group settings, people get triggered. You as a coach can get triggered. So I don't know if it's a skill set, but it's a real deeper capacity, I feel, that's needed to just, yeah, be very landed in yourself so that you can hold space for the group. So
Yeah,
presence.
I think that's such an important point that you make, Sarah. And I'd add to that as well. I think it's a bit of an understanding of whether you like being with groups, because some people don't, do they? And I think, like you're saying, all our insecurities get dialed up when we're with a group and we're meeting the group's insecurities. So that presence and that groundedness is so important. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd probably just add a few things. I think having an understanding of adult learning, um, I think is really helpful. And there are a number of, I suppose, models and approaches which a group coach could learn that can really support them. I think having a deep understanding of group process and different structures that you could utilize as a group coach. Um, so one of the things that we talk about in our training is really about being able to read the maturity of the group and where the group are in their development process. So, for example, if the group are less mature, well, we might bring more structure as a group coach. So perhaps we might use an action learning approach or another methodology versus the very mature group, which will be very much more emergent and working with what the individual participants are bringing on the day. So I definitely think adult learning. I definitely think understanding group process. I mean, obviously, your I suppose expertise around dialogue, which you sort of touched on with reading the room, but I think any of those sort of skill sets that can really enable effective dialogue in groups, and yeah, probably the consultancy piece as well, and understanding and having an approach to the consultancy phase at the start of the process is really helpful as well. So I'm just reading David's question. Do you think that the coaching approach changes between a group that is struggling or underperforming versus a high-performing group? Challenge within the latter would be acceptable, even the norm. Yeah, I suppose it depends what's happening that means the group is struggling or underperforming. But, you know, if we think about that sort of initial phase of a group, well, they want a sense of belonging. There needs to be that psychological safety before we can increase the level of challenge. So I would definitely say there would be different interventions that we'd be making. And I think the thing that we explore, Sarah, is just the sense of that sort of dynamism of working with a group, because you know a group might be in different phases in different parts of a session, as well as in different stages of the group coaching process as well.
Yes. And I think the other variable I would add in that can be useful, that lots of coaches would bring, would be any understanding of personality differences, whether you're looking at that through an MBTI lens or other frameworks that you've got that can inform the interventions you make, because maybe you need to lift the energy in the room, or maybe if it's full of chatty extroverts, you need to slow things down, get to a more reflective pace. Maybe you're dealing with some people who love a structured approach, and then other people who like being more in the moment. And so understanding personality differences can be very helpful too.
Yeah, and I'm just noticing David's reflection about online versus face-to-face, and yeah, agree. I mean, I think there's different approaches. We'll be using online, virtually, we'll be using more technology, and I suppose the functionality of the system to really help us manage the process, versus when we're in the room, we might be using movement and different setups of the group. So Sarah, I know we're running out of time here, but just, I suppose, any resources, or so that was one of the requests, any reading that you would point groups, coaches to around this work?
Oh gosh, I'm struggling to remember the author, Damien. This moment of a book I read recently, just I think it was called Group Coaching. I think it was just called Group Coaching, psychologist background. So I'm sorry, I don't remember the author's name. But I'm just thinking about our field notes for the program and how it draws on so many different areas, actually. So, for example, John Heron's work on the 6 interventions, and we sort of spend time on the program looking at that. I love John Heron's work. I think that is excellent. And just some of the coaching resources out there, like Jonathan Passmore's The Coach's Handbook, because all those foundational coaching skills are really going to help you with the group coaching session. And as you speak, I don't know if I remember the author.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, we may want to mention Reading the Room as well, actually. But I'd say one book I'd point you to is Coaching Teams and Groups by Christine Thornton. I think that's a helpful book for a coach.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just also going to acknowledge, Damien, the deliberate decision that you made, that in terms of the programme, one of them is in person and one of them is online. And I think it's fair to say we found both experiences really rich in different ways. So we had the online one in the depths of December, didn't we, last year? And it was great to just do it all online, not have to travel, and very rich learning.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, and I've seen there's a couple of questions just really around what group coaching is. So I'm just going to say that, and then we're going to sort of bring the session to a close. I mean, usually what you would see in terms of group coaching is there's either a thematic reason that's bringing the group together. So there's an example I gave earlier, the leaders are in transition. And so the intent of the group coaching process is to support the leaders in transition over a number of sessions, over a period, to support their transition into the organization. However, group coaching means that each of the individual coachees will have their own objectives for attending the group coaching process. So they will be learning through the group coaching process and enabling them to achieve their individual objectives. Otherwise, it tends to be aimed at supporting leaders, maybe in development. So it may be shadowing a leadership development experience that they're going through. So again, there's a thematic reason why they're together in a room, but the individuals will all have personal objectives that they're trying to achieve. So I hope that sort of helps with that explanation. So Sarah, we're sort of at time. So just anything you want to say just to close this conversation down today?
Oh, I just want to say thank you for the rich set of questions in the chat. I know we haven't covered everything, but people are welcome, I'm guessing, to reach out. You could certainly find me on LinkedIn, happy to answer any other questions we've not managed in our 30 minutes or so here, and all the best to all our participants for taking this forward in whatever way you do. Thanks, Damien, for inviting.
Thanks, Sarah.